The reality about therapy is that a slim proportion of people can afford it financially, have access to it geographically, and have space for it in their day. That's a benefit very few people can benefit from, the one-on-one.
Health, fitness, mindset, nutrition. Live better and longer. I'm Saad Alam, and let's hone in.
Look, a lot of my stuff, there are 3 TED Talks, there are interviews, there are a lot of articles, I've written hundreds, thousands of articles. There's a lot of free information online. The reality about therapy is that a slim proportion of people can afford it financially, have access to it geographically, and have space for it in their day. That's a benefit very few people can benefit from, the one-on-one. Now, there are many companies and apps, these days that are trying to fill some of those gaps. But therapy is not the only answer. It can be, if you can afford it, if it's available to you, and if you find the right person, because you need to. Yeah. The match there is very important. Terrific. But if not, this is work you can do yourself. And by the way, when you're in therapy, an hour a week, that's not going to do it. If you think, I'm going to work on myself an hour a week, it's like, go to the gym an hour a week. Let's see how that does for you. Nothing. Yeah. It will do nothing. So it's all about getting direction to then continue working on yourself outside of that. So that's the gambit anyway. So you can be doing that at any point. And really, when I say any point, throughout your life.
Generally, when I talk to my therapist or my executive coach, it's an hour and then I'm on the rest of my life and then I see him next week. There is so much work that needs to go on in that time between your conversations, and that can be very difficult. Are there any tools out there you've seen to really help push people into, quote unquote, doing the work?
So the interesting thing, for example, my first TED Talk, Why We Need to Practice Emotional First Aid, when that came out, I started getting a ton of messages, and I still do, mostly from men, just characterizing who the message was from. I'm not saying just men, but the messages were mostly from men. And in general, this was the basic message. This was the generic form of the message. I saw your talk. It made me have a feeling. I'm not even sure what that was, but I thought I should reach out. In other words, people were like, oh, I felt something.
Yeah.
And then, because I felt something, there's things are going on inside me. Oh my goodness, what do I do with that? I'm not used to, and usually when they said they felt something, it made them emotional. It made them sad, they teared up. And that's what they weren't expecting. Like, why did that, what's going on there? Seinfeld said, what's this salty substance coming down from my eyes? So that's what makes them suddenly realize, I have feelings. I'm so used to dismissing them, pushing them down, ignoring them, but I have them. And that's almost an opening of, and by the way, of course you do, we all do, but the idea is that if you're not on top of them, they will impact you in ways that you're not aware of, and often in ways that are not great for you. So the goal here is not just to thrive in some way that might be superfluous. The goal here is to really prevent yourself from thinking incorrectly, from doing things and thinking in ways that will actually damage you, not just emotionally, but very, very concretely, functionally in your life.
What do you mean by that? Like, how does my emotion damage me concretely, functionally?
Here's an example. A study. I think this is probably college students, because most psychology studies are done on psychology students at university, because they're the ones that have to sign up for experiments. But it was about students. But those students were put into 2 groups. They were given an IQ test before, then they had to write something, and then they were given a second form of the IQ test with different questions. And what they had to write, each group had to think differently. One group had to think of a future, just think of what their future would be like. The other, they were told, based on that test, which was an IQ test, it wasn't, you might end up alone in your life. So we want you to contemplate what that would be like. And that group lost on average 10 IQ points from that thought exercise. It was a thought exercise, and you saw a drop of roughly 10 IQ points. Now, that is functional. We also know, for example, when people experience failure, they become very risk averse in the aftermath of that failure. So for creatives, being chewed out about how bad your presentation was, now go and make it better, it's not the best gambit for the manager, because you actually now made them so risk averse, they're going to be thinking inside the box rather than outside the box. I'm just giving you very simple examples, but it goes much deeper and much more intensely in other situations that are more specific. But yes, we are impacted all the time. I'll give you just one last example. How we think about stress, how we understand what the sources of stress are, is going to determine whether that is the kind of stress that is healthy or the kind of stress that is unhealthy, and that will really saddle us. And the only difference is our framing of it, and our framing happens automatically, except we can change it. So again, there are so many ways in which we are going to be thoroughly impacted that, again, people are not aware of, but once they get more educated, they start to realize, oh, these things are highly linked.
I want to talk about loneliness in a second, and I also want to talk about failure, but there's a comment I want to make about the test that you just cited. I wholeheartedly believe that the thought you put in your brain drives how you feel the rest of the day. And I believe it so much that, right, people talk about the quote unquote their morning routine. And what I've realized is that in the morning when I wake up and I make sure that I'm doing my gratitude practice, right? And I very distinctly do it in an app called 5 Minute Journal, where you think about something, you envision it, you feel it, you visualize it in your mind's eye, you think about how grateful you are for it, and think about how great you want your day to be. It automatically, it's like it puts a mold on your thoughts. So when you go throughout the rest of your day, you're generally in a better mood. And you can almost, what I'll call like architect a little bit of, I would say, upside into your life pretty regularly if you decide to, what's the word I'm looking for? Be very intentional about the fact that positive thoughts lead to positive outcomes.